A hat in the radio ring **** frontispiece. A hat in the radio ring by Garret Smith. The radio's playing hell with politics. With this sententious remark, a long speech for Boss Quaid, the big fellow, who had just taken the end seat at the speaker's table, glared at the microphone opposite the Toastmaster's seat halfway down the long alley of snowy linen. His pale little eyes betrayed secret anxiety through their slits of fat. "How so?" asked the lean, dapper gentleman at Quaid's right. "Why, it's this way," Mr. Forsyth broke in, the rat-faced little man at the boss's left. "Take this dinner tonight, for instance. In the old days when we pulled a keynote dinner like this, that was to set the pace for the campaign, we could pretty much keep it bottled up. We had the newspaper boys fixed, and if anybody made the wrong turn, or started putting tacks on the pike, maybe we could keep it out of the papers. Anyhow, we could get it toned down, or if worse came to worse, have a statement of our own printed along with it. Now everybody has a radio and gets the gas right hot from the cylinder. He should worry about what the papers say next morning." "Barney's right. They don't even go to meetings anymore," mourned the boss. "Unless they're hand-picked, like this one." Barney chuckled. "Barney's right," the boss echoed the chuckle. Barney Fogarty, the big fellow's secretary, was as loquacious by nature and profession as his chief was silent. But his speech was the thought of Quaid, okayed by the big fellow's guttural "Barney's right. I take it I better be careful what I say tonight," the elegant Forsyth murmured with mock anxiety, as if his utterances were to be his own spontaneous outbursts. "If you want the boss to get you nominated for governor," you had. Barney laughed. "As long as you're cagey about the state power proposition, it doesn't matter a whoop what else you say. It's some dark horse popping up here tonight that we're afraid of. Every yahoo in the state will know it as soon as we do." "Barney's right," Boss Quaid sighed again. "People hear too damn much these days." Boss Quaid's domain had for 20 years been practically a one-party state, dominated by the machine which Quaid till lately held tight in his fat hand. But lately he had felt his power slipping a little with this ominous growth of modern publicity. Walls had developed too many ears. Now on the eve of the county conventions he was not quite sure he would get enough hand-picked delegates to dominate the coming state convention which would nominate a governor this year. The question of state control of water power, on which the boss saw fit to hedge, was threatening internal disruption. Tomorrow was county convention day. He was hoping that Forsyth's speech at this dinner tonight would swing sentiment in enough doubtful counties to give him a majority of pledged delegates when the state convention opened. But he was uncomfortably conscious of that great unseen radio audience in 100,000 homes already settled before their speakers, listening eagerly to the preliminary gossip of the announcer as the faithful gathered around the tables. He knew that a wrong note struck at this dinner might start a thunderstorm upstate over which he would have no control. Forsyth was worrying, too, under his suave exterior. "Suppose somebody did break loose tonight," he remarked, leaning insinuatingly toward the boss's secretary. Couldn't an accident happen to the radio temporarily? Oh, nothing raw like that. Barney deprecated without pushed palm. They'd smell something rotten to the end of the state. No, I got a better way. He glanced at a smaller table adjoining the low platform on which the speaker's table stood. It was surrounded by a group of dashing and determined-appearing young men. At the end of this table, facing them, sat a dark youth, even more rat-visaged than the red-headed Barney. He winked knowingly at the latter. "Who's that young gunman?" Forsyth asked a little distastefully. "That's Jim Neenan," Barney told him. "He's a vaudeville actor and a friend of the organization. Jim and his little pals will kind of unofficially supervise what goes over the radio. Watch 'em if anything breaks." And something did break. It held off so long that less acute observers of political nature than Boss Quaid were beginning to breathe freely. The harmless preliminary speakers had received polite applause. Boss Quaid, after a glowing tribute from the toastmaster, had risen, bobbed his head, grunted, and sat down to the tune of a thunderous ovation and orchestral strains of "He's a Jolly Good Fellow." Then Forsyth, the favored son and real speaker of the evening, had risen and said nothing dangerous, in burning, glittering language and at considerable length. But while his favorite was talking, the roving little eyes of the boss had settled on the keen, quizzical face of a big, shaggy man at the other end of the table. The man's high, thoughtful brow corrugated as the would-be candidate went on with his mellifluous platitudes. The pleasant blue eyes, bent intently on the speaker, turned to grey steel. Quaid nudged Barney. "Watch out for Hammond," he whispered. When Forsyth sat down, Hammond sat bolt upright in his chair and stared hard at the toastmaster. It was not on the cards to have any more speeches. Forsyth's address had been planned as the climax of the evening. A half-dozen lay figures and uncertain quantities remained at the speaker's table who would be called on as a matter of form. All were supposed to know better than to do more than rise and bow. While the prolonged applause for Forsyth was still ringing, the newspaper men gathered up their notes and departed, leaving the Associated Press man to let them know if anything unexpected broke loose at the last minute, not amply covered by the radio. Then, in its perfunctory course, the name of Martin W. Hammond of Gainsport was called. The big man arose promptly. But instead of sitting down with a bow and a word of greeting, as the man before him had done, he marched straight down the table to the speaker's position in front of the microphone. "Gentlemen, I beg a moment's indulgence," he began in deep, mellow tones that filled the suddenly silent hall and rang in the ears of the greater radio audience in 100,000 homes. "I did not come prepared to make a speech, but I cannot let this occasion pass without saying certain things that the Honorable Mr. Forsyth left unsaid." Boss Quaid grunted and kicked Barney's shins. Barney turned and winked at Jim Neenan at the little table. Neenan and his gang jumped to their feet with a yell of "Hurrah for Forsyth! Hurrah for the next governor! Hurrah! Hurrah! Hurrah!" They chanted it in chorus, crowding to the edge of the platform, and leaning almost over the speaker's table, with their faces only a few feet from the ringing microphone. They kept it up, their cheers alternated with catcalls. The tumult spread through the big hall like a contagion. The whole place was in an uproar. For a minute or two Hammond stood facing the clamor, a sardonic smile on his face. Then as the noise continued he leaned over the microphone and tried to go on with his speech in an effort to reach his radio audience at least. But the young cheerleaders bent closer to the instrument and redoubled their efforts. The ether waves bore only an inarticulate roar. Twice when the confusion subsided a little he tried it again, only to be thwarted by a renewal of the racket. Here and there through the throng there were cries of protest from the fairer-minded. There were growing indications that the meeting might break up in a riot. The toastmaster stood helpless, his eyes fixed on the boss, who regarded him with an indulgent grin. At length Hammond gave it up altogether. With a bow and a smile, he turned and walked out of the hall. At this gesture a partial hush fell on the crowd. There were cries of shame. Call him back. Give him a chance. Several fist fights were threatened among some of the more explosive of the faithful. The toastmaster began gesturing for silence. Then Jim Neenan leaped to the center of the speaker's table and gave an elaborate caricature of the presiding officer's gestures. As soon as he could make himself heard, he shouted, "Gentlemen, inasmuch as Mr. Hammond had to catch a train and could not make a long speech, I've been asked to go on with it." Thereupon the vaudeville artist launched into a parody of a political speech that in a few minutes had restored the crowd to hilarious good humor. At length the orchestra struck up "Home, Sweet Home" and the crowd filed out, most of them convinced that the whole episode had been a bit of horseplay staged to give a light touch to a successful occasion. Boss Quaid was chuckling contentedly as he entered his limousine with Forsyth, Barney Fogarty, and Jim Neenan. He had expressed his satisfaction and his gratitude to the manipulators by giving the dignitaries the slip, with the exception of Forsyth, and inviting the trio to supper at his favorite roadhouse where neither henchmen nor reporters would search him out. "Now we're all set," Barney assured Forsyth as they rolled away. There were 3 or 4 possible bad eggs there tonight, Hammond among them. Hammond was the only one that hatched, and we squashed him before he got out of the shell, laughed him to death. Barney's right, Quaid agreed. But for once Barney was wrong. How amazingly, mysteriously wrong, he learned 2.5 hours later, when the party stopped at an all-night newsstand on the way home and bought copies of the Press and the Sentinel, the capital city's 2 morning papers. Martin W. Hammond throws hat in ring. This was the flaring headline that smote his eyes from one front page, at the top of the dinner story. Hammond flouts Forsyth, declares himself candidate. This blazed at him from the other newspaper. "What?" the boss exploded. "The damned traitor sent him a statement." "Hell's bells. Statement nothing," Barney ejaculated. These papers are full of prunes, both of 'em. Why, they say he made this speech as the dinner feature of the occasion, the Sentinel calls it. For several minutes, under the glare of the dome light in Quaid's limousine, the four men read, pop-eyed with amazement, the silence broken only by occasional crackling profanity. There was no doubt but that both papers had seemingly gone mad. According to their accounts, Hammond had actually completed a ringing speech of some 20 minutes' duration at the dinner, and at its conclusion had received tumultuous applause. He had scathingly picked Forsyth's empty mouthings to pieces, keenly analyzed the state power proposition, declaring it must be put in the hands of experts to determine the right policy as between state and local control. He was personally engaged in such a study now, he declared, and the state could have his services as governor to direct such a study and carry out its results. There was added a brief account of Hammond's career as a successful engineer who had served the state for one term as engineer 10 years before. Quaid finished reading and dashed the paper to the floor in a purple rage. "Sentinel office, George," he ordered the chauffeur. The Sentinel was controlled by Quaid. Boone, its managing editor, and handyman to the boss, was just about to go home when the enraged and mystified quartet stormed in. "What the hell?" Quaid demanded, slapping the paper down on the desk and pointing one pudgy finger at the offensive and mystic headline. "Are you fellows crazy or drunk?" "That's what I wonder." Boone returned with unwonted spirit. "We've been hunting you boys for 2 hours, almost lost the trains on the first 2 editions, waiting for you to give orders on the handling of this yarn. Why didn't you tell us you were going to flop to Hammond? All we could do was to print the news." "News, hell!" Quaid snorted. "Damned lies. Hammond never made a speech. Tried to, got hooted out." Boone leaned close and got a good sample of the breath the quartet had acquired at the roadhouse, drawing erroneous but not unnatural conclusions as to their sobriety. "Say that again slow," he requested. "I don't get you." Barney said it for him, making from 2 to 4 words grow where one grew before. "Now I say you ought to get out an extra denying this rot," Barney wound up, looking about for confirmation. "Barney's right," declared the boss. "Now, listen," Boone exclaimed. "I was glued to that radio horn from the time your dinner opened until the orchestra stopped playing Home, Sweet Home. Don't try to tell me I don't know what I heard. Half the rest of the office heard it too. About 20 other people who listened in on the radio in Goebel's drugstore drilled in here to get the inside dope. The men over in the press heard it too. They had me on the wire, asking for a statement from you. Now we all heard Hammond called on at the end of the evening. We heard him get a whale of a demonstration and some kidding. Then we heard his speech to the finish and the cheering he got afterward. We got his speech right from the radio by shorthand. They heard it all over the state too. We've had wires from papers from one end of the state to the other asking for dope. Now, in the face of that, do you want to make an ass of the whole party by a statement that your keynote dinner was so wet that you were all too drunk to hear the key speech? Did your reporter hear that speech? Quaid demanded in bewilderment. No. The boys all left when Forsyth got through. The AP man stayed, but he must have been drunk and gone to sleep. We couldn't get anything out of him. Listen, Boss Barney broke in. Somebody double-crossed us, unless the spooks have been at work. I bet Hammond played in with the broadcasting station some way and got M to let him break in. The whole mischief's been done for tonight. We better lie low till we find out how it was done. Barney's right, Quaid decided, and stalked out. Barney was right when he said the mischief had been done. But the following day only increased the mystery of how. First thing in the morning, the fatal morning of the county conventions, Quaid began getting wires from leaders all over the state, asking instructions, and confirming the fact that every radio user outside of the dinner hall had heard the speech. Also, he had innumerable phone calls from people who had been at the dinner, asking what it was all about and confirming the fact that no one at the dinner had heard Hammond's speech. Following Barney's hint, the staff at the radio broadcasting station were given the third degree. They swore that Hammond's speech had come over the regular wire along with the rest of the dinner program. Their announcer on duty at the hall that night could shed no further light, as he had gone home after the Forsyth speech, arranging with the toastmaster to give the radio good night. Hammond himself, who had a reputation for truth-telling, issued a statement to the afternoon papers exonerating the broadcasting staff. I was invited to speak at the dinner, and I did, he told the reporters. That's all. I'll swear to you I made the whole speech right there. I'm sorry if the gentleman at the dinner couldn't hear it, but I have the statement of my radio audience about 1,000 to 1 against theirs. That's all they got out of him, and the twinkle in his eye indicated that he was enjoying himself immensely. But the speech was on record. That was the important and practical fact. Events pressed too fast to waste further time over a puzzle as to how it got there. Early reports from the counties decided Quaid to hold off his own statement for another day till he could count noses of instructed delegates. It was a worried group who met with him in his office the day after the county conventions. Forsyth, under his air of debonair indifference, was decidedly anxious for fear his sponsor might decide to drop him for the new entrant. "Give 'em the dope," Barney the boss ordered. Well, we figure just about 40% of the delegates pledged or sure for Forsyth, and just about the same number for Hammond. That leaves about 20% waiting to be shown. And that kind hates a dude, Quaid remarked, looking hard at Forsyth. "Meaning that's what I am?" he asked. No. No. Barney assured him. He means that's what they might figure if you go to talk to M personally. They're shy of city men. You're a polished gentleman. Hammond's sort of rough and ready. Other things equal, they'd be for him if they got a look at you both. and it's a cinch Hammond'll go around and talk to M. I expect Mr. Quaid would like to keep you both out of sight of those birds. For once he'd like a straight radio campaign. Barney's right, rumbled the boss. Perhaps I'd better begin wearing soft shirts and a slouch hat, Forsyth suggested wryly. Be yourself, grunted the boss. I'm for you. Forsyth departed, content with this assurance of the boss's support, but not altogether optimistic as to the final outcome. Barney Fogarty retired thoughtfully to his own private office and went into the silences. After a little of this, some cryptic phoning resulted in a luncheon appointment in a discreet backroom of one of the city's quietest speakeasies. Late that afternoon Jim Neenan, the handy impersonator and general utility man, presented himself on private business at the offices of Thomas Forsyth, who rather distastefully granted the caller's request for a confidential conference. Look here, Neenan opened, I hear you and the boss are honin' for a pre-convention campaign that'll limit you and Hammond to radio speeches, figuring it would give you a better break. That seems to be Mr. Quaid's idea, Forsyth admitted dryly. I suppose you know Hammond has a different idea. I have heard as much. How much would it be worth to you to have it arranged so that Hammond would be glad of a chance to make it a radio campaign? It might be worth quite a little, but I fail to see what is the practical use of discussing it. Just this. For a price I might be able to bring it about. Forsyth laughed. Judging from such of your methods as I have seen, I feel safe in saying I'd pay as high as $1,000 if my opponent is persuaded to such a course and you can convince me that you were instrumental in bringing it about. Is that a promise? Neenan demanded. It is, Forsyth agreed again with another cynical laugh. And if your machinations result in my nomination, I'll make it another 1,000. And that's a promise. Now I'll bid you good day, as I have another appointment. Neenan departed, a crafty smile on his narrow features. That same evening Warren Hammond arose from a hurried dinner and gave his pretty young wife an affectionate good-night kiss. Don't wait up for me, Ladybird, he warned her. I've got to speak at 2 meetings, and I may be out till all hours. I wish I could go with you to your first meeting. I'll be thinking of you. I'm so proud of my big boy. Even if he does traffic with the powers of darkness and employ black magic to make himself invisible, he laughed. I think you're mean, Warren, not to tell me the truth about that mysterious radio speech. I think everybody there must have been drunk, as one of the papers hinted, and you don't want to let me know it. Hammond laughed boyishly. Why, it was so simple I'm ashamed to tell it. When I do tell you, you'll be ashamed to think you didn't guess it. But do you think it's nice to fib to everybody about it? Nary a fib, he denied. I've told nothing but the truth, so help me. Now stop worrying and go to bed early. He kissed her again and was off. But Warren Hammond did not get to his first meeting. In fact, he got no more than a scant 100 yards down the narrow country road that led from his suburban home into the capital city. He was just shifting his gears into first when he felt the front end of the car swaying violently back and forth. He threw out the clutch and jammed on the brakes, but it was too late. The front of the car lurched over to one side, dropped to the ground, and plowed down into the ditch at the roadside. He was thrown forward, felt a stinging blow on the head, and then went unconscious. A few minutes later a passing car saw the wreck and stopped. Hammond came to in the ditch beside his car to find a neighbor applying first aid. Besides the blow on the head, which had left an ugly welt across his scalp, both legs were broken. Fortunately the glass in his car was non-breakable, and he had suffered no disfiguring cuts. The cause of the accident proved to be a loose front wheel, which had come off, completely tipping the car half over. It had all occurred so suddenly that he had no clear notion of just what had happened to him, but he assumed that his head had hit one of the top braces, and that his legs had been broken when he was thrown over the door. Never at any time did he suspect that his accident had been inspired and carefully planned. But a few days later Jim Neenan, with a smile more deeply insinuating than ever, again called at the offices of Thomas Forsyth. He carried with him a copy of an afternoon paper just off the press. "Perhaps you've noticed that I've made good on that radio campaign stuff," he announced, pointing to a story on the front page. Forsyth took the paper and read an announcement by Hammond's political manager. The latter would be confined to his room and bed until long after the state convention, his doctor had predicted, but would doubtless be restored to complete health by election time. In the meantime the physician saw no reason why the patient should not carry on such mental labor as the pre-convention campaign required, as soon as he had completely recovered from the first shock of the accident. It had therefore been arranged that he should deliver a limited number of speeches by radio, from a telephone in his room connecting with the broadcasting station. He would also have a final statement to deliver at the convention in the same manner, assuming the privilege of a regularly elected delegate and a leading candidate for head of the ticket. "How's that?" Neenan gloated. "Barney tells me you are going to swing back with a big show of doing the sporting thing by agreeing to the same program yourself. So we've got our wish, and little Jimmy's come for his pay. How's that? Wasn't I to get $1,000 if I arranged it so that Hammond would consent to a radio campaign?" Forsyth was frankly puzzled for a moment, then saw a light. "Look here, you young thug, do you mean you deliberately wrecked Hammond's car? Suppose you'd killed him?" "Good Lord, did you think I meant anything like that? We talked about persuading." Neenan grinned. "We're practical politicians, ain't we? There's different kinds of persuadin'. Mind, I'm not confessin' anything, but I leave it to your judgment if that looks just like an accident. There wasn't a chance in the world of his being killed, with a guy hidden in the back of the car to stop him if he got to going too fast with his wheel loosened up. Wasn't it funny he wasn't marred up?" nothing wrong but a little tap on the head and a couple of broken legs that laid him up proper without any permanent hurt. He never guessed that he got that biff on the bean from a blackjack from behind him, and that his legs was broken nice and quiet by hand afterwards. "You cold-blooded devil," Forsyth began, but checked himself on second thought. After all, he couldn't afford to antagonize this crafty little man. "Look here," he went on. "I haven't got 1,000 on hand just now, and I didn't mean just that, but here's 100 cash on account, and I'll make good on the 2,000 all right if you can show you've put over my nomination without any more physical brutality and no danger of a comeback." There was a little argument over it, but in the end Neenan left with his 100 and a promise that he'd earn the big money yet for. So the novel pre-convention radio campaign opened and developed presently, a pitch of excitement seldom exceeded by a closely contested presidential election. Twice a week alternately, the courtesy of the capital city's broadcasting station was extended to one of the contestants, Hammond reading his speech from his bed in his little farmhouse in the suburbs, Forsyth delivering his from the hotel suite which he had taken as headquarters till after the state convention. Harking back to the famous front porch campaigns of certain presidential candidates, this campaign of Hammond's was facetiously dubbed a bedside campaign. Forsyth made much of it in his glittering speeches, which continued to evade anything but generalities regarding the state water power issue. On the whole, the two contestants continued to run neck and neck. They continued to hold their original blocks of instructed or definitely committed delegates, each falling some 10% short of the required majority. And the little block of uncommitted delegates from the rural districts who held the balance of power, despite repeated rumors of a break after each radio speech, remained uncommitted and stuck together. There had been no personal mudslinging on either hand. They admired the finished oratory of Forsyth. But equally they admired Hammond's clear, cold analysis of the power situation. They were suspending judgment until the final summing up of recommendations he promised to make when they assembled for the convention. So the time of the state convention arrived, and, as Boss Quaid had feared, the fight was carried to its floor with the chance of victory ready to fall either way according to the words a sick man might utter into his telephone in the privacy of his bedroom. For when the convention opened, Warren Hammond was really ill, broken down by the strain of the campaign on top of the shock of his injuries. With great effort he had finished dictating his final radio statement, which he hoped to read over the wire to the convention. Now there were grave doubts whether he would be able to read it himself. The morning of the convention dawned at last. Into the city's convention hall the delegates poured. Quaid snorted at the spectacle. "Don't look much like the old-time batch of handmade ones," the big fellow mourned to Barney as they watched from the gallery. "Nope," his satellite admitted. "Especially with the skirts in on the game. But the women ain't nothing to this Hammond. He's a woman and a devil and one of the Lord Almighty's mysterious ways wrapped up in one bundle. He's been one trick ahead of us at every jump. That accident of his was either plain dumb good luck or fixed by himself intentional. The poor invalid stuff's got the women going. The boys that are feeling him out say even those in the neutral crowd are leanin' his way. I'm afraid he's got us licked, Chief. You've said it, Barney, afraid I'm about through. An out-of-town man under the edge of the gallery hailed a local acquaintance. Hello, Dick. Is this the place where you held the ghost dinner? Barney and his chief grinned at each other ruefully. They'll always believe we fellows were blind and dumb that night, Barney replied. And I'll always believe those radio people double-crossed us somehow, Quaid added. And the big fellow clung to that belief to his dying day. A good-sized knot of delegates came in, making the roof ring with cheers for Forsyth. Another knot across the hall tried to drown them out with counter-cheers for Hammond. Hello, you bedroomers! Shouted a Forsyth man above the din. Go on, you ghost walkers, a man from the other ranks retorted. And in Hammond's sick room out in the little suburban farmhouse, the invalid was listening to the tumult in the convention hall as it came to him over his radio. A vigilant wife and nurse kept him constantly under their eye, shutting off the blaring instrument whenever he showed signs of getting nervous. Remember, Warren, if you overstrain your nerves, the doctor won't let you read your speech, Mrs. Hammond warned him at intervals. I've got to read that speech if it kills me, he told her. If I don't know what's going on beforehand, I won't be able to put the right spirit in it. And he managed to grin at her cheerily, although it was an evident effort. In Forsyth's headquarters at the hotel near the convention hall, the other candidate was nervously rehearsing his speech in the intervals when he was listening in on the radio. Little Jim Neenan was in constant attendance upon him these days, acting as general handyman. The crafty one had taken a room of his own down the corridor from Forsyth's suite where he could be on hand night and day to make himself useful. He was charging nothing for these services, but he hadn't forgotten the main chance. Remember, you're going to owe me a fat $2,000 in the course of the next day or two, he reminded his self-selected chief at frequent intervals. But Forsyth vouchsafed him nothing more by way of reply than a sarcastic lifting of the eyebrows. At times Neenan studied him reflectively, and worry lines appeared in the narrow brow. Then there was a flash of dangerous light in the cold, close-set eyes. The convention moved through 2 days of tense suspense and excitement. During the routine business of organizing, whenever there was opportunity for a test vote, the original lineup continued firm. This was discernible on the second day also, in the cheering and speeches accompanying the putting of Forsyth and Hammond in nomination for governor. The neutrals were still standing in a firm block, waiting for Hammond's statement. Then, on the morning of the third day came the long-awaited opportunity. The session opened with a motion that the convention proceed to ballot for governor. Before it was seconded, a Hammond adherent, as previously arranged with the presiding officer, arose, and after a brief eulogy of the sick man announced that he had just been informed by telephone that Mr. Hammond's doctor had given permission to the patient to read his address to the convention over the radio that morning. He therefore moved that the convention extend this courtesy to Mr. Hammond as one of the nominees. The motion was carried unanimously, and the time for the address set at 10:30, 1/2 hour away. Then, in accordance also with agreement, the same privilege was sought and obtained for Forsyth, and his time set at 12 o'clock. During the few minutes that remained before Hammond's voice was due to be heard over the wire, there was an atmosphere of electric suspense in no wise mitigated by the blaring of the band which filled in the interval. In the sick man's bedroom miles away, the doctor had just examined the patient and ordered everyone else out of the room but himself and the nurse in order that the invalid speaker might be as little disturbed as possible. Pale and trembling he sat propped up in the bed, his manuscript on a tray before him, and the telephone transmitter on an extension bracket at his lips. Downstairs his family and immediate friends were in front of the radio which would hurl back to them the speech he was about to send out. In a voice deep and resonant in spite of his weakness he began his brief statement. The listeners below and the great crowds in the convention hall down in the city sat breathless. After outlining his purposes toward the party in case he were selected, he summarized his finding in the water power problem in words eloquent for their simple clearness. Finally came the closing section in which he was to give his long-awaited policy. His counselors listening downstairs, who had worked with him over the manuscript, knew his suggestion for a long-term non-partisan commission by heart. But as he began this section they heard words strangely unfamiliar. They stared at each other in amazement. Down in the convention hall it was as though the assemblage had been struck by a bolt of lightning. They heard Hammond, the supposed scientific progressive, deliberately proposing as his conclusions that the state keep its hands off the water power forever, and leave it in the grasp of the present private corporations. As his words ceased, it was evident that in a few brief sentences, Hammond had torn down all the esteem that he had built up, and with it his hopes of the nomination. There was a moment of silence in the great hall, and then pandemonium broke loose. Boss Quaid and Barney Fogarty pounded each other on the backs and shouted with glee. Hammond had gone further than Quaid in his most arrogant moments had ever dared go. "The guy's gone crazy," Barney roared. "Barney, you're right," roared the big fellow. In the Hammond farmhouse the doctor came out of the speaker's room to face a horrified group. "Doctor, has it been too much for him? Is he delirious?" Mrs. Hammond gasped. "Oh, no, he's all right. Seems to be a great relief to him to get it off his mind," the doctor reassured her. "But, doctor, you heard what he said at the last?" Hammond's partner insisted. "Altogether different from what he'd planned." "Oh, I didn't notice what he said," the doctor told him calmly. "I was busy counting his heartbeats." A few minutes later, down in the city, Little Jim Neenan drove hurriedly up to the hotel where Forsyth had headquarters, leaped from his car and made his way up to the Forsyth suite with all speed. Forsyth was closeted in his private office, going over for the last time the address that he was to deliver over the radio in a few minutes, but Jim burst in on him unannounced. "Now do you owe me the $2,000, he demanded triumphantly. "I do not." "What for?" "Get out of here." "Can't you see I'm busy?" Forsyth snapped at him. "What for?" Neenan snarled. "Why, for putting Hammond out of the running." "Didn't you know I did it?" Forsyth stared at him in contempt. "You did it," he sneered. "That's a delightful bluff, but I'm too busy to be amused. I don't owe you $2,000, and never will. Now get out, I tell you." "But listen, I can prove." Neenan got no further. Forsyth stood over him menacingly. "Another word from you and I'll ring for a cop and have you arrested for conspiracy. Remember, I know who broke Hammond's legs." Neenan stared back at him for a moment with eyes turned to steel gimlets, white hot at the points. Then without a word he left the room and the suite and hurried down the corridor to his own apartment. A few minutes later the eloquent voice of Forsyth was being poured into the convention hall. He was surpassing himself in his flights of oratory. He wound up, deprecating his opponent's position on the water power question, and pledging himself to continue a safe and sane policy of watchful waiting until the time was ripe for the state to act. Forsyth laid down his manuscript and turned to receive the plaudits of the group around him. "Stop. Just a moment, Mr. Forsyth," came an unfamiliar voice of thunder from the amplifier of the convention hall, and from the radio horn in the Forsyth suite. "You have something to confess, Mr. Forsyth. Do it now, before I'm compelled not only to confess it for you, but to make a further statement that will make you a fugitive from justice." The booming voice ceased, and for a moment there was absolute silence. Then another voice came from the radio. Forsyth started, and turned deadly pale. He had not spoken a word, but the voice that he was hearing was seemingly his own. "I am afraid I will have to confess," the voice was saying. "My opponent, Mr. Hammond, has been the victim of a conspiracy." The closing words of his speech which led you to condemn him just now were not his own, but the artful interpolation of an impostor clever at disguising his voice. "If you will go to the woodland near the home of Mr. Hammond, just outside the city, through which the telephone line passes that brought his speech this morning from his bedroom to the broadcasting station, you will find still dangling from one of the poles a wire which the impostor had cut into the telephone line. It was a simple thing for him to attach a telephone to the end of that wire and listen in while Mr. Hammond read his speech. When my opponent reached his long-waited-for conclusion regarding state water power, the impostor cut him out of the line, and cleverly imitating Mr. Hammond's voice, he delivered the false statement which you heard with so much consternation. What Mr. Hammond actually read, and you can prove it by getting his manuscript, was in substance as follows. The simulated voice of Forsyth then gave a close approximation of what Hammond had intended them to hear. "That is all I have to say," concluded the pseudo-Forsyth. The real Forsyth, still deathly pale, whirled away from the radio. "That damned little rat of a Neenan. He double-crossed me because I wouldn't bribe him. He played the same trick on me that he did on Hammond. Down to his room quick." The group rushed pell-mell down the hall and burst into the room which Neenan had occupied. But Mr. Neenan had gone, taking with him the sweet flavor of his revenge. Over the window-sill dangled a wire attached to a telephone instrument. It ran out along the ledge and connected with the special wire that had been installed in Forsyth's suite. The crafty Neenan had lately feared that his service to Forsyth would be repudiated, and had prepared the instrument of his revenge beforehand. And in the convention hall at this moment the uproar had subsided to the point where one of Forsyth's former adherents could make himself heard. "Mr. Chairman," he said, "I move that we dispense with the roll call and instruct the Secretary of the Convention to cast one ballot for Mr. Warren Hammond as our candidate for governor." It was seconded and carried without a dissenting voice. A few minutes later a local man came across Boss Quaid as he was slipping quietly out of a side entrance of the convention hall. "Not leaving us, are you, Chief?" the other asked. "Yep," he sighed. "Barney's been intimating lately that I'm a has-been." "Barney's right." 6 a week after Warren Hammond had taken the oath of office as governor of the state, he dropped a line to one Joseph Morris, a radio announcer employed by the local broadcasting station, suggesting to Mr. Morris that it might be to his advantage to call and see him. "Mr. Morris," the new governor began when the young man appeared, "I feel that I owe you an apology and a reward as well, in case anything in the line of jobs that I have to dispose of would appeal to you. I've looked you up, and the only thing I find against you is that on a certain evening when you were acting as announcer at our party's keynote pre-convention dinner, you took a chance and went home early, thereby making me governor of the state." He paused and chuckled at Morris's utter bewilderment. "Well, it's the answer to the ghost story that's been puzzling a lot of people since last spring, how I was able to get a speech of mine from that dinner when I apparently wasn't there. It's so darn simple. When I left the table licked that night and went out the side door, I almost ran into your little soundproof announcer's booth with its handy little microphone all ready for use, and its handy little switch to cut off the microphone out on the table so that I was able to stay right there and substitute my speech for Mr. Jim Neenan's horseplay, switching back to catch his applause and give it to my radio audience as my own. At that I guess I owe Jim something, too. But if there is anything I can do for you, let me know." The end transcriber's note: this story appeared in the October 1923 issue of McClure's magazine. End of the Project Gutenberg ebook. A Hat in the Radio Ring. Updated editions will replace the previous one, the old editions will be renamed. Creating the works from print editions not protected by U.S. copyright law means that no one owns a United States copyright in these works, so the Foundation, and you, can copy and distribute it in the United States without permission and without paying copyright royalties. Special rules, set forth in the general terms of use part of this license, apply to copying and distributing Project Gutenberg trademark symbol electronic works to protect the Project Gutenberg trademark symbol concept and trademark. Project Gutenberg is a registered trademark, and may not be used if you charge for an ebook, except by following the terms of the trademark license, including paying royalties for use of the Project Gutenberg trademark. If you do not charge anything for copies of this ebook, complying with the trademark license is very easy. You may use this ebook for nearly any purpose such as creation of derivative works, reports, performances and research. Project Gutenberg ebooks may be modified and printed and given away. You may do practically anything in the United States with ebooks not protected by U.S. copyright law. Redistribution is subject to the trademark license, especially commercial redistribution. Start. Full license. The full Project Gutenberg license. Please read this before you distribute or use this work to protect the Project Gutenberg trademark symbol mission of promoting the free distribution of electronic works, by using or distributing this work, or any other work associated in any way with the phrase Project Gutenberg. You agree to comply with all the terms of the full Project Gutenberg trademark symbol license available with this file or online at www.gutenberg.org/license. Section 1. General Terms of Use and Redistributing Project Gutenberg Trademark Symbol Electronic Works 1.0. By reading or using any part of this Project Gutenberg trademark symbol electronic work, you indicate that you have read, understand, agree to and accept all the terms of this license and intellectual property, trademark/copyright, agreement. If you do not agree to abide by all the terms of this agreement, you must cease using and return or destroy all copies of Project Gutenberg trademark symbol electronic works in your possession. If you paid a fee for obtaining a copy of or access to a Project Gutenberg trademark symbol electronic work and you do not agree to be bound by the terms of this agreement, you may obtain a refund from the person or entity to whom you paid the fee as set forth in paragraph 1.e.8. 1.b. Project Gutenberg is a registered trademark. It may only be used on or associated in any way with an electronic work by people who agree to be bound by the terms of this agreement. There are a few things that you can do with most Project Gutenberg trademark symbol electronic works even without complying with the full terms of this agreement. See paragraph 1.c below. There are a lot of things you can do with Project Gutenberg trademark symbol electronic works if you follow the terms of this agreement and help preserve free future access to Project Gutenberg trademark symbol electronic works. See paragraph 1.e below. 1.c. The Project Gutenberg Literary Archive Foundation, the Foundation or PGLAF, owns a compilation copyright in the collection of Project Gutenberg trademark symbol electronic works. Nearly all the individual works in the collection are in the public domain in the United States. If an individual work is unprotected by copyright law in the United States and you are located in the United States, we do not claim a right to prevent you from copying, distributing, performing, displaying or creating derivative works based on the work as long as all references to Project Gutenberg are removed. Of course, we hope that you will support the Project Gutenberg trademark symbol mission of promoting free access to electronic works by freely sharing Project Gutenberg trademark symbol works in compliance with the terms of this agreement for keeping the Project Gutenberg trademark symbol name associated with the work. You can easily comply with the terms of this agreement by keeping this work in the same format with its attached full Project Gutenberg trademark symbol license when you share it without charge with others. 1.d. The copyright laws of the place where you are located also govern what you can do with this work. Copyright laws in most countries are in a constant state of change. If you are outside the United States, check the laws of your country in addition to the terms of this agreement before downloading, copying, displaying, performing, distributing or creating derivative works based on this work or any other Project Gutenberg trademark symbol work. The Foundation makes no representations concerning the copyright status of any work in any country other than the United States. 1.e. Unless you have removed all references to Project Gutenberg, 1.e.1. The following sentence, with active links to, or other immediate access to, the full Project Gutenberg trademark symbol license must appear prominently whenever any copy of a Project Gutenberg trademark symbol work, any work on which the phrase Project Gutenberg appears, or with which the phrase Project Gutenberg is associated, is accessed, displayed, performed, viewed, copied or distributed. This ebook is for the use of anyone anywhere in the United States and most other parts of the world at no cost and with almost no restrictions whatsoever. You may copy it, give it away or reuse it under the terms of the Project Gutenberg license included with this ebook or online at www.gutenberg.org. If you are not located in the United States, you will have to check the laws of the country where you are located before using this ebook. 1.e.2. If an individual Project Gutenberg trademark symbol electronic work is derived from texts not protected by U.S. copyright law, does not contain a notice indicating that it is posted with permission of the copyright holder, the work can be copied and distributed to anyone in the United States without paying any fees or charges. If you are redistributing or providing access to a work with the phrase Project Gutenberg associated with or appearing on the work, you must comply either with the requirements of paragraphs 1.e.1 through 1.e.7 or obtain permission for the use of the work and the Project Gutenberg trademark symbol trademark as set forth in paragraphs 1.e.8 or 1.e.9. 1.e.3. If an individual Project Gutenberg trademark symbol electronic work is posted with the permission of the copyright holder, your use and distribution must comply with both paragraphs 1.e.1 through 1.e.7 and any additional terms imposed by the copyright holder. Additional terms will be linked to the Project Gutenberg trademark symbol license for all works posted with the permission of the copyright holder found at the beginning of this work. 1.e.4 Do not unlink or detach or remove the full Project Gutenberg trademark symbol license terms from this work, or any files containing a part of this work or any other work associated with Project Gutenberg trademark symbol. 1.e.5 Do not copy, display, perform, distribute or redistribute this electronic work, or any part of this electronic work, without prominently displaying the sentence set forth in paragraph 1.e.1 with active links or immediate access to the full terms of the Project Gutenberg trademark symbol license. 1.e.6 You may convert to and distribute this work in any binary, compressed, marked up, non-proprietary or proprietary form, including any word processing or hypertext form. However, if you provide access to or distribute copies of a Project Gutenberg trademark symbol work in a format other than plain vanilla ASCII or other format used in the official version posted on the official Project Gutenberg trademark symbol website, www.gutenberg.org, you must, at no additional cost, fee or expense to the user, provide a copy, a means of exporting a copy, or a means of obtaining a copy upon request, of the work in its original plain vanilla ASCII or other form. Any alternate format must include the full Project Gutenberg trademark symbol license as specified in paragraph 1.e.1. 1.e.7 Do not charge a fee for access to, viewing, displaying, performing, copying or distributing any Project Gutenberg trademark symbol works unless you comply with paragraph 1.e.8 or 1.e.9. 1.e.8 You may charge a reasonable fee for copies of or providing access to or distributing Project Gutenberg trademark symbol electronic works provided that you pay a royalty fee of 20% of the gross profits you derive from the use of Project Gutenberg trademark symbol works calculated using the method you already use to calculate your applicable taxes. The fee is owed to the owner of the Project Gutenberg trademark symbol trademark, but he has agreed to donate royalties under this paragraph to the Project Gutenberg Literary Archive Foundation. Royalty payments must be paid within 60 days following each date on which you prepare, or are legally required to prepare, your periodic tax returns. Royalty payments should be clearly marked as such and sent to the Project Gutenberg Literary Archive Foundation at the address specified in Section 4, Information about donations to the Project Gutenberg Literary Archive Foundation. You provide a full refund of any money paid by a user who notifies you in writing, or by email, within 30 days of receipt that he does not agree to the terms of the full Project Gutenberg trademark symbol license. You must require such a user to return or destroy all copies of the works possessed in a physical medium and discontinue all use of and all access to other copies of Project Gutenberg trademark symbol works. You provide, in accordance with paragraph 1.f.3, a full refund of any money paid for a work or a replacement copy, if a defect in the electronic work is discovered and reported to you within 90 days of receipt of the work. You comply with all other terms of this agreement for free distribution of Project Gutenberg trademark symbol works. 1.e.9. If you wish to charge a fee or distribute a Project Gutenberg trademark symbol electronic work or group of works on different terms than are set forth in this agreement, you must obtain permission in writing from the Project Gutenberg Literary Archive Foundation, the manager of the Project Gutenberg trademark symbol trademark. Contact the Foundation as set forth in Section 3 below. 1.f1.f.1 Project Gutenberg volunteers and employees expend considerable effort to identify, do copyright research on, transcribe and proofread works not protected by U.S. copyright law in creating the Project Gutenberg trademark symbol collection. Despite these efforts, Project Gutenberg trademark symbol electronic works, and the medium on which they may be stored, may contain defects such as, but not limited to, incomplete, inaccurate or corrupt data, transcription errors, a copyright or other intellectual property infringement, a defective or damaged disk or other medium, a computer virus, or computer codes that damage or cannot be read by your equipment. 1.f.2 Limited warranty, disclaimer of damages, except for the right of replacement or refund described in paragraph 1.f.3, the Project Gutenberg Literary Archive Foundation, the owner of the Project Gutenberg trademark symbol trademark, and any other party distributing a Project Gutenberg trademark symbol electronic work under this agreement, disclaim all liability to you for damages, costs and expenses, including legal fees. You agree that you have no remedies for negligence, strict liability, breach of warranty or breach of contract except those provided in paragraph 1.f.3. You agree that the Foundation, the trademark owner, and any distributor under this agreement will not be liable to you for actual, direct, indirect, consequential, punitive or incidental damages even if you give notice of the possibility of such damage. 1.f.3 Limited right of replacement or refund. If you discover a defect in this electronic work within 90 days of receiving it, you can receive a refund of the money, if any, you paid for it by sending a written explanation to the person you received the work from. If you received the work on a physical medium, you must return the medium with your written explanation. The person or entity that provided you with the defective work may elect to provide a replacement copy in lieu of a refund. If you received the work electronically, the person or entity providing it to you may choose to give you a second opportunity to receive the work electronically in lieu of a refund. If the second copy is also defective, you may demand a refund in writing without further opportunities to fix the problem. 1.f.4 except for the limited right of replacement or refund set forth in paragraph 1.f.3. This work is provided to you as is, with no other warranties of any kind, express or implied, including but not limited to warranties of merchantability or fitness for any purpose. 1.f.5. Some states do not allow disclaimers of certain implied warranties or the exclusion or limitation of certain types of damages. If any disclaimer or limitation set forth in this agreement violates the law of the state applicable to this agreement, the agreement shall be interpreted to make the maximum disclaimer or limitation permitted by the applicable state law. The invalidity or unenforceability of any provision of this agreement shall not void the remaining provisions. 1.f.6. Indemnity. You agree to indemnify and hold the foundation, the trademark owner, any agent or employee of the foundation, anyone providing copies of Project Gutenberg trademark symbol electronic works in accordance with this agreement, and any volunteers associated with the production, promotion and distribution of Project Gutenberg trademark symbol electronic works, harmless from all liability, costs and expenses, including legal fees, that arise directly or indirectly from any of the following which you do or cause to occur. A. Distribution of this or any Project Gutenberg trademark symbol work. B. Alteration, modification, or additions or deletions to any Project Gutenberg trademark symbol work, and C. Any defect you cause. Section 2. Information about the mission of Project Gutenberg trademark symbol. Project Gutenberg trademark symbol is synonymous with the free distribution of electronic works in formats readable by the widest variety of computers, including obsolete, old, middle-aged and new computers. It exists because of the efforts of hundreds of volunteers and donations from people in all walks of life. Volunteers and financial support to provide volunteers with the assistance they need are critical to reaching Project Gutenberg trademark symbol's goals and ensuring that the Project Gutenberg trademark symbol collection will remain freely available for generations to come. In 2001, the Project Gutenberg Literary Archive Foundation was created to provide a secure and permanent future for Project Gutenberg trademark symbol and future generations. To learn more about the Project Gutenberg Literary Archive Foundation and how your efforts and donations can help, see sections 3 and 4 and the Foundation information page at www.gutenberg.org. Section 3. Information about the Project Gutenberg Literary Archive Foundation. The Project Gutenberg Literary Archive Foundation is a non-profit 501(c)(3) educational corporation organized under the laws of the state of Mississippi and granted tax-exempt status by the Internal Revenue Service. The Foundation's IN or Federal Tax Identification Number is 64-6221541. Contributions to the Project Gutenberg Literary Archive Foundation are tax-deductible to the full extent permitted by U.S. federal laws and your state's laws. The Foundation's business office is located at 809 North 1500 West, Salt Lake City, UT 84116, 801, 596, 1887. Email contact links and up-to-date contact information can be found at the Foundation's website and official page at www.gutenberg.org/contact section 4. Information about donations to the Project Gutenberg Literary Archive Foundation. Project Gutenberg trademark symbol depends upon and cannot survive without widespread public support and donations to carry out its mission of increasing the number of public domain and licensed works that can be freely distributed in machine-readable form accessible by the widest array of equipment, including outdated equipment. Many small donations, $1 to $5,000, are particularly important to maintaining tax-exempt status with the IRS. The Foundation is committed to complying with the laws regulating charities and charitable donations in all 50 states of the United States. Compliance requirements are not uniform and it takes a considerable effort, much paperwork and many fees to meet and keep up with these requirements. We do not solicit donations in locations where we have not received written confirmation of compliance. To send donations or determine the status of compliance for any particular state, visit www.gutenberg.org/donate. While we cannot and do not solicit contributions from states where we have not met the solicitation requirements, we know of no prohibition against accepting unsolicited donations from donors in such states who approach us with offers to donate. International donations are gratefully accepted, but we cannot make any statements concerning tax treatment of donations received from outside the United States. U.S. laws alone swamp our small staff. Please check the Project Gutenberg web pages for current donation methods and addresses. Donations are accepted in a number of other ways, including checks, online payments and credit card donations. To donate, please visit www.gutenberg.org/donate. Section 5. General information about Project Gutenberg trademark symbol electronic works. Professor Michael S. Hart was the originator of the Project Gutenberg trademark symbol concept of a library of electronic works that could be freely shared with anyone. For 40 years, he produced and distributed Project Gutenberg trademark symbol ebooks with only a loose network of volunteer support. Project Gutenberg trademark symbol ebooks are often created from several printed editions, all of which are confirmed as not protected by copyright in the US unless a copyright notice is included. Thus, we do not necessarily keep ebooks in compliance with any particular paper edition. Most people start at our website, which has the main PG search facility, www.gutenberg.org. This website includes information about Project Gutenberg trademark symbol, including how to make donations to the Project Gutenberg Literary Archive Foundation, how to help produce our new ebooks, and how to subscribe to our email newsletter to hear about new ebooks.